It was something wild. Something no one had quite seen before on the small screen. Elvis Presley, with his dark hair and his confident sneer, stepped into living rooms and changed everything. Before him, television was one thing. After him, it became something else entirely. It wasn't just about music anymore. It was about spectacle, youth, controversy, and a whole new way of looking at fame. Think about it. In the mid-1950s, families gathered around the television set. There were maybe 3 channels, if you were lucky. What did they see? Variety shows, sitcoms, news. Then this kid from Memphis shows up, and suddenly the picture tube vibrates with a raw energy that felt both thrilling and to some deeply unsettling. He wasn't just singing songs, he was performing an earthquake. He wasn't just a singer, he was an event. How did this one man, this one performer, manage to reshape how we watched, listened, and understood popular culture through the lens of television and media? What was it about his early appearances that caused such a stir? And how did that stir ripple through decades of media production? How did he become a prototype for every rock star, pop idol, and media sensation that followed? And what does his story tell us about the power of the moving image, the control of an image, and the lasting impact of a truly magnetic personality? This isn't just about Elvis. It's about how media found its voice, found its power, and sometimes lost its way, all through the lens of a singular star. Number 18. How did Elvis's first TV appearances break the mold? When Elvis first hit national television, it was like a lightning bolt. His debut on the Dorsey Brothers stage show in January 1956 wasn't just another performance. It was a cultural intervention. People had heard his music on the radio, sure, but seeing him move, that was the game changer. Up until then, television largely presented musicians in a pretty static way. They stood still, maybe swayed a little, sang their song. But Elvis, he was pure motion. His legs, his hips, his whole body was part of the music. Dr. Kevin Gossine, a media historian, once pointed out that this wasn't just dance, it was a visceral expression that felt almost primal. It challenged the polite, contained performance styles that dominated early television. The show was aired live, meaning millions saw this raw energy unfiltered. This was before videotape became common, so what you saw was happening right then. It felt immediate and real. This directness connected with young audiences in a way nothing had before. They saw someone who looked and moved like them, or at least how they wished they could. This wasn't a guy in a tuxedo crooning a ballad. This was a rebel, a jolt of electricity. His appearances led to a massive increase in record sales. For example, after his Dorsey Brothers shows, his single Heartbreak Hotel shot up the charts. The record companies and TV executives quickly realized the immense power of television to propel a musician from regional fame to national stardom almost overnight. Before Elvis, many artists built their careers primarily through touring and radio play. And television gave them a direct line into millions of homes, making celebrity an instantly shared experience. This wasn't just about his movements, though, it was also about the sound. Television sets of the era weren't known for their high-fidelity audio, but Elvis's voice, his distinct rock and roll sound, still cut through. It introduced a new musical genre to a wider, more conservative audience who might never have sought it out on the radio. It forced mainstream America to confront a new kind of music, often perceived as dangerous by older generations. Scholars like George Lipsitz have written extensively on how popular culture forms, like rock and roll, amplified by media like television, often become battlegrounds for intergenerational conflict and anxieties about social change. Elvis's early TV shows perfectly illustrate this point. But what if those early camera angles had been different? What if the sound quality had been even worse? What if the network had chosen to censor him even more heavily from the start? Would his impact have been as immediate or as widespread? What did we miss in those live broadcasts that wasn't captured or understood by the cameras of the time? And how much of his perceived danger was actually constructed by the media's framing of his performances rather than solely by the performances themselves? Number 17. How did public outcry and censorship shape media content? Elvis Presley's movements, particularly his hip gyrations, stirred up a huge controversy. And this wasn't just water cooler talk, it led to direct censorship on national television. The most famous example is his third appearance on the Ed Sullivan Show in January 1957. Sullivan himself, initially hesitant to book Elvis due to the vulgarity claims, famously insisted that the cameras only show Elvis from the waist up. This was a direct response to public outrage, parent groups, and conservative media critics who deemed his performances too suggestive, too sexual for family viewing. This wasn't an isolated incident. Before Sullivan's strict decree, his performances on the Milton Berle Show in June 1956 had already drawn fire, especially his raw, energetic rendition of Hound Dog. Berle had even joked about Elvis's movements, playing into the controversy. Critics like Jack Gould of the New York Times called his performance a dreary exhibition of sex. This kind of media criticism, widely circulated, put pressure on networks and show producers. What happened on screen wasn't just a performance, it became a public debate about morality, decency, and the corrupting influence of popular culture on youth. Dr. David Mark, an expert in television history, notes that this period marked a significant turning point where broadcasters started to internalize and self-censor in anticipation of public backlash, shaping future content. The waist-up shot on Sullivan wasn't just about covering Elvis's hips. It was a symbolic act, a declaration of control by the established media over the perceived wildness of rock and roll. But paradoxically, this censorship only amplified Elvis's allure. The forbidden fruit became sweeter. Teens, aware of the controversy, were drawn even more to the rebel figure. The media's attempt to sanitize him inadvertently highlighted his subversive appeal. It created a narrative. Elvis was so powerful, so dangerous, that even television couldn't fully contain him. This censorship taught networks a lesson: controversy could boost ratings, even if it brought criticism. Future shows learned to navigate this delicate balance, pushing boundaries just enough to generate buzz without completely alienating advertisers or the establishment. This dynamic also revealed the power of the television medium itself in shaping public perception. By focusing on his movements and discussing their perceived impropriety, the media directed the conversation, constructing Elvis as a symbol of youthful rebellion. This wasn't just about what was shown, it was about how it was discussed and framed by journalists and cultural commentators. But what would have happened if Ed Sullivan had let the cameras roll as usual? Would the controversy have been less, or even more, intense? Did the act of censorship inadvertently create a lasting myth around his supposed danger? How did this single act of censorship influence other artists' performance styles on television in the following decades? And how much of the media's moral panic was truly about protecting children versus a discomfort with shifting racial and cultural norms that Elvis represented? Number 16, how did TV turn Elvis into the first mass market teen idol? Before Elvis, there were stars, sure, but the concept of a teen idol as a mass market phenomenon, specifically manufactured and amplified by television, largely started with him. His early TV appearances, particularly those in 1956, were crucial in this. Shows like the Ed Sullivan Show and the Milton Berle Show reached millions of American homes simultaneously. This unprecedented reach meant that overnight, a whole generation of teenagers could see, hear, and instantly connect with Elvis. It wasn't just about hearing his songs on the radio, it was about seeing his face, his hair, his clothes, and those moves. Dr. Karen L. Williams, a sociologist who studied youth culture, noted that television provided a shared communal experience for teenagers, forging a collective identity around their adoration for Elvis. This visual connection was vital. Television allowed young fans to develop parasocial relationships with Elvis. They felt like they knew him even though they never met him. The close-ups, the way he looked into the camera, all fostered this illusion of intimacy. Academic analysis of teen fan culture, like that by Henry Jenkins, often points to the role of media in creating these intense attachments. Girls, in particular, were captivated. Their screams at live events, widely reported and often shown on news segments, became a key part of the Elvis phenomenon. This hysteria, fueled by TV, was both celebrated and derided, but it was undeniably powerful. It signaled the arrival of a distinct youth demographic with its own disposable income and cultural tastes. Television became the primary vehicle for this fan cultivation. When Elvis appeared on a show, ratings soared. For example, his Ed Sullivan appearances were some of the highest-rated television events of their time, reportedly attracting over 80% of the viewing audience. This showed advertisers and producers the immense buying power and influence of the teenage market. It taught media executives that targeting this demographic could lead to massive commercial success. This understanding paved the way for future teen-oriented programming, pop music shows, and a whole industry built around youth culture. Colonel Tom Parker, Elvis's manager, was a master at leveraging this. He understood that TV was the most effective way to reach the broadest possible audience, transforming Elvis from a regional curiosity into a national obsession. He carefully orchestrated appearances to maximize exposure, knowing that each one would translate into millions of record sales and merchandise purchases. The strategic use of television to build a star image and a dedicated fan base set the blueprint for nearly every pop star who followed. But what if Elvis's manager hadn't been so astute in his use of television? Would another artist have stepped into that role as the ultimate teen idol? How much of the hysteria was genuine fan reaction, and how much was amplified or even manufactured by the media's portrayal of it? Did the focus on his teen appeal inadvertently limit his artistic growth or pigeonhole him in the eyes of critics? And what did this early intense focus on a youth demographic mean for the future of programming aimed at diverse age groups? From number 15, how did Elvis's music and movies blend on the small screen? After his initial TV explosion, Elvis transitioned into a film career that was heavily intertwined with television. His movies, almost 30 of them, were often musical vehicles designed to showcase his songs. While these films were made for the big screen, their perpetual presence on television, especially in the years after their theatrical release, significantly shaped how a wider audience experienced Elvis's music and persona. Many people in subsequent generations first encountered Elvis not through his live performances or records, but through these movies airing on syndicated TV. These films like Jailhouse Rock or Blue Hawaii were essentially long-form music videos before music videos existed. They presented Elvis's songs within a narrative context, giving visuals to the lyrics and cementing his image as a romantic lead, an adventurous hero, or a rebellious youth. Dr. Richard Maltby, a film scholar, has discussed how these films, though often critically panned, were incredibly effective at reinforcing Elvis's star power and distributing his music. They turned each song into a mini-story, enhancing its memorability and emotional impact for the TV viewer. And television amplified the reach of these films immensely. Weekend matinees, afternoon movie slots, and late-night showings meant that these Elvis movies became a constant fixture in American homes. This created a continuous loop of Elvis exposure, especially for younger audiences who grew up watching them. The sheer volume of his filmography ensured that his presence on television was almost omnipresent for decades. This repetitive exposure cultivated a deep familiarity with his songs and his screen persona, even for those who weren't active record buyers. It made his music an indelible part of the cultural landscape, accessible at the flick of a switch. The constant television airings also played a role in the commercial success of his soundtracks. When a popular Elvis movie played on TV, it often sparked renewed interest in the accompanying album or singles. This symbiotic relationship between film, music, and television was a powerful marketing tool. Colonel Parker understood this perfectly, meticulously planning film releases and TV schedules to keep Elvis in the public eye. The films might not have been cinematic masterpieces, but they were incredibly effective as television programming that kept the Elvis brand alive and well. But what if these movies had been higher quality, designed for critical acclaim rather than pure commercial saturation? Would their impact on television's musical landscape have been different or even less pervasive? How did the often formulaic nature of these films, seen repeatedly on TV, influence public perception of Elvis's artistry? And in what ways did the constant exposure to these prepackaged musical narratives on TV prepare audiences for the eventual rise of music videos and MTV? Did the casual, repeated viewing of these films on TV diminish or enhance his legendary status for future generations? Number 14, how did the 1968 comeback special redefine TV production? The Elvis television special, often called the 68 comeback special, was a pivotal moment not just for Elvis, but for television itself. Aired on NBC on December 3rd, 1968, it marked his return to live performance after years in Hollywood making formulaic movies. This special was groundbreaking in several ways. It wasn't just a concert, it was a carefully crafted narrative, a story of reclamation. Director Steve Binder and producer Bones Howe, along with Elvis, decided against Colonel Parker's initial idea of a traditional Christmas special. Instead, they opted for something edgier, more authentic, and more rock and roll. Dr. Susan Douglas, a media studies professor, has highlighted how this special subverted expectations and revitalized the TV variety show format. The special featured Elvis in an intimate, informal setting, performing for a small audience in a boxing ring-like stage. These sit-down sessions, where he chatted with his band and recounted stories, showcased his charisma and humor in a way that his films never had. It felt raw, unscripted, and incredibly personal. This direct address to the audience, the sense of spontaneity, was revolutionary for a major network special. It brought an authenticity that felt fresh and exciting, paving the way for future artists to engage with their fans in a more candid manner on television. It wasn't just about the songs, it was about the connection. Beyond the intimate segments, the special also featured highly theatrical, cinematic production numbers, often employing innovative camera work and dynamic staging. The iconic black leather suit he wore became an instant legend, symbolizing his return to his rock and roll roots. The show was a huge rating success, pulling in a 42 share, meaning 42% of all televisions tuned in were watching Elvis. It cemented his relevance in a rapidly changing musical landscape, proving that live performance, creatively filmed, could still captivate a mass audience. This blend of intimate, almost documentary-style segments with grand, theatrical production numbers set a new standard for how musical specials could be conceived and executed. The special proved that an artist could reinvent themselves through a thoughtfully produced television event. It demonstrated the power of television, not just to broadcast music, but to craft an entire artistic statement and manage an artist's public image. It's a conscious effort to move beyond the saccharine image of his movie years and remind people of the powerful, charismatic performer he truly was. This strategic use of television as a career reinvention tool became a model for countless artists in the decades that followed. But what if Colonel Parker had gotten his way and it had been a saccharine Christmas special? Would Elvis's career have ended then, or simply faded without this jolt? Did the pressure of the comeback narrative force Elvis to deliver a more authentic, powerful performance than he might have otherwise? How did the innovative camera work and staging of the special directly influence the visual language of later concert films and music videos? And what lessons did television producers truly learn about balancing artistic integrity with commercial appeal from the enormous success of this single broadcast? Number 13, how did Elvis's concert films influence future music documentaries? Following the success of the '68 comeback special, Elvis returned to touring and recording, and this new phase of his career was extensively documented through concert films. Elvis, That's the Way It Is. 1970 and Elvis on Tour. 1972 were not just films, they were precursors to modern music documentaries and concert movies, heavily influenced by television production techniques and designed for both theatrical and later television viewing. These films provided unprecedented behind-the-scenes access to Elvis, blending concert footage with glimpses into his rehearsals, personal moments, and life on the road. Our film critic Roger Ebert in his review noted the raw energy captured in these films. These movies weren't just about watching a concert from a good seat. They aimed to give the audience an immersive experience, showing the creative process, the dedication, and the sheer effort involved in putting on a show. Elvis on Tour, for instance, utilized a multi-camera setup and split screens, a technique that was relatively experimental for the time, borrowing from the nascent visual language being developed in television news and experimental film. Dr. Carol Flynn, a scholar of music and media, argues that these films helped establish the conventions of the concert documentary genre, blending performance with a narrative about the artist's life and work. The television aspect is crucial here because while they started in cinemas, these films found a long life on television, becoming staples of late-night programming and special broadcasts. For many, these documentaries offered the only opportunity to see the mature, powerful stage performer that Elvis had become. They preserved his stage presence, his elaborate jumpsuits, and the incredible energy of his live shows for posterity and for new generations. The films brought the arena experience into the living room, effectively bridging the gap between live performance and home viewing. They also showed the human side of the superstar, sometimes revealing his vulnerabilities, his humor, and the immense pressure he was under. This level of access and personal storytelling was revolutionary for the time. It set a precedent for how artists would allow themselves to be documented, influencing everything from Madonna Truth or Dare to modern reality shows that follow musicians. These films blurred the lines between performance and reality, contributing to the development of a media landscape obsessed with celebrity authenticity. But what if these films had been less revealing, focusing only on the polished performance? Would they have resonated as deeply with audiences or provided a less complete picture of the artist? How did the technology of the early 1970s limit what could be captured, and what might modern filming techniques have revealed about those tours? Did The focus on his later career concert spectacle overshadowed the impact of his earlier, more rebellious performances for audiences who encountered him this way. And what responsibility do such documentaries have to portray the full, complex reality of a star, especially as their health and personal struggles become more apparent? Number 12, how did TV turn Elvis into a merchandising powerhouse? Elvis wasn't just a singer or a movie star, he was a brand, and television was the primary engine that drove his merchandising empire. From the moment he became a national sensation in 1956, Colonel Tom Parker understood the incredible potential for turning Elvis's image into tangible products. And television was the most effective way to make that image ubiquitous. Each TV appearance wasn't just a performance, it was a commercial for Elvis. Dr. Russell W. Belk, a consumer culture researcher, has written about how figures like Elvis became early examples of celebrity endorsement and brand extension, often driven by visual media. Think about it after seeing Elvis on the Ed Sullivan Show. Fans didn't just want his records. They wanted everything connected to him. Parker licensed Elvis's image for over 100 different products in just a few years. There were Elvis guitars, keychains, charm bracelets, lipstick, hound dog plush toys, and even I Love Elvis buttons. Many of these items directly referenced elements of his TV persona or popular song titles. The visual imagery associated with Elvis's pompadour, his sneer, his leather jacket, all became instantly recognizable symbols thanks to their repetitive broadcasts on television. Television created the demand by making Elvis a constant presence in American homes. The exposure was so pervasive that even those who weren't actively seeking Elvis merchandise were constantly reminded of his existence and his associated iconography. This continuous reinforcement through TV appearances and the subsequent news coverage of his fame and fan base made his brand inescapable. It primed consumers, especially young fans, to want to own a piece of the phenomenon they saw on screen. This merchandising model, heavily reliant on television exposure, set a precedent for how future celebrities would leverage their fame. It proved that a charismatic performer, amplified by mass media, could generate immense revenue far beyond album sales and concert tickets. Elvis became a template for the modern celebrity as a multi-platform, multi-product enterprise. The constant visual reinforcement of his image through television was key to making his brand instantly recognizable and desirable on an unprecedented scale. But if television hadn't reached such a broad and impressionable audience in the 1950s, would Elvis's merchandising empire have ever taken off to the same degree? How did the saturation of Elvis products, fueled by his TV fame, influence the public's perception of his artistic credibility? Did it dilute his image or simply expand his reach? And what lessons did other artists and their managers learn from Parker's aggressive, television-driven merchandising strategy, shaping the commercial landscape of popular music for decades to come? Or number 11, how did global television reach make Elvis an international star? Well, Elvis's stardom wasn't confined to America, and television played a critical role in his global reach, even before satellite broadcasts made instantaneous worldwide viewing commonplace. While his early TV appearances were live in the US, films, newsreels, and syndicated programs featuring Elvis were distributed internationally. This meant that people in Europe, Asia, and other parts of the world could see him perform, hear his music, and witness the American cultural phenomenon unfold. Dr. Toby Miller, a scholar of global media, often discusses how American popular culture icons were disseminated globally through various media channels, with television becoming increasingly significant. These early forms of international television distribution helped cultivate a global fan base. For instance, segments from his Ed Sullivan appearances were shown in countries like Canada and the UK, exposing audiences to his magnetic stage presence. His movies, too, were widely distributed to cinemas worldwide and later found their way onto international television channels. This visual exposure was crucial. It wasn't just about hearing Heartbreak Hotel on the radio in London. It was about seeing the man, his movements, his style, which transcended language barriers. The visual language of rock and roll, exemplified by Elvis, became a universal signifier of youth rebellion and excitement. As television technology advanced and satellite broadcasting became more prevalent in the late 1960s and 1970s, Elvis's specials, like the '68 Comeback and Aloha from Hawaii, achieved truly global reach. Aloha from Hawaii, broadcast via satellite in January 1973, was a landmark event. It was the first entertainment special by a solo artist to be broadcast live worldwide. It aired in over 40 countries, including Australia, Japan, and parts of Europe, and reached an estimated 1 billion viewers. This was an unprecedented feat of global media dissemination. It solidified Elvis's status as an international icon, showcasing him at the peak of his mature performing power to a vast simultaneous global audience. This global television event demonstrated the immense power of satellite technology to unite disparate audiences around a single cultural moment. It proved that a star's image and performance could instantly transcend national borders, creating a shared global experience. This laid the groundwork for future global televised events, from Live Aid to the Olympics opening ceremonies. Elvis, through this broadcast, became not just an American legend, but a truly planetary phenomenon, his image and music echoing in cultures far removed from his Memphis roots. But what if early international television distribution had been more limited, or if the Aloha from Hawaii special had failed to connect with global audiences? Would Elvis's international legacy have been significantly smaller, or would it have developed more slowly through other means? How did different cultural contexts interpret Elvis's image and music when it arrived via television? And what unrecognized role did the local television stations and their programming choices play in shaping Elvis's global reception beyond the major network broadcasts? Number 10. Did Elvis's TV spots plant seeds for the music video format? When you watch Elvis's early TV performances or the musical segments from his films, you can see faint outlines of what would become the music video. Before MTV, artists didn't have dedicated channels for visual promotion, but Elvis's team and television producers often used visual storytelling around his songs. This wasn't accidental. It was an early recognition of the power of linking sound and vision. Dr. Andrew Goodwin, a prominent music video theorist, points to such early visual representations of music as foundational to the music video aesthetic. Consider the Jailhouse Rock musical number in his 1957 film. This sequence, often replayed on television, is highly choreographed, featuring Elvis singing and dancing with fellow inmates in a prison set. It's a self-contained visual narrative directly tied to the song's lyrics and rhythm. It tells a story, creates a mood, and presents the artist in a stylized way, all for the purpose of promoting the song. While it was part of a movie, its frequent television airings as a standalone clip or within compilations gave it a life similar to a music video. Even his live TV performances had elements of this. The camera angles, the close-ups on his expressions, the way his movements were framed, these weren't just random shots. They were deliberate choices made by directors to enhance the song's impact visually. When he sang Hound Dog on the Milton Berle Show, the way the camera captured his controversial gyrations was part of the message. The visual was the message as much as the audio. This emphasis on the visual delivery of music was a departure from earlier, more static television performances. Later in the late 1960s and early 1970s, as his career shifted, television specials like the '68 Comeback were full of segments that could be pulled out as promotional clips. The opening of the '68 special with Elvis performing Trouble Guitar Man is a prime example of a performance segment designed for maximum visual impact and rewatchability, serving a similar function to a contemporary music video. These weren't explicit music videos as we know them, but they certainly accustom audiences to the idea that a song could and should have a strong visual component beyond just the artist performing live. This continuous experimentation with how to visually represent music for a mass audience via television, from choreographed film sequences to dynamic live camera work, helped shape audience expectations. It prepared viewers for a world where music would be almost inseparably linked to moving images. Elvis's career was a living laboratory for this evolution, demonstrating how the small screen could amplify a song's power through carefully crafted visuals. But if Elvis's cinematic career had been less focused on musical numbers, would the development of the music video have taken a different path or been delayed? Did the repetitive, often simple visuals of his musical movie scenes accidentally set a low bar for future music videos, or did they provide a foundational language? How much of the music video aesthetic attributed to Elvis was a conscious artistic choice, and how much was simply the standard way films presented songs at the time? And how might the emergence of music video culture have been different if Elvis had continued to actively make them in the MTV era? Number 9. How did media strategically build and control Elvis's star image? The creation and maintenance of Elvis Presley's star image was a carefully managed process, and television was a central tool in this construction. Colonel Tom Parker, Elvis's manager, was a genius at controlling the narrative and image presented to the public. He understood that every TV appearance, every interview, every news segment contributed to the persona of Elvis. Scholars like Richard Dyer, in his work on star theory, explain how media figures are carefully constructed entities, and Elvis is a prime example. Initially, the image was one of a rebellious, dangerous sex symbol, fueled by his energetic movements and the moral panic it generated. Parker capitalized on this, making Elvis seem both accessible and slightly unattainable. TV appearances were designed to highlight his charisma and stage presence. However, as controversy grew, Parker carefully managed Elvis's image to make him more palatable to a wider, more conservative audience. This was evident in appearances where Elvis was encouraged to be more subdued, or in the deliberate waist-up shots on Ed Sullivan. The aim was to soften the edges without losing the core appeal. Later, during his movie career, television played a crucial role in maintaining a specific, family-friendly image. His films, which constantly aired on TV, presented him as a wholesome, often romantic hero. This was a deliberate shift from his earlier, wilder persona. Parker ensured that Elvis rarely gave unscripted interviews and that his public appearances were meticulously controlled. This tight management meant that the public mainly saw the version of Elvis that Parker wanted them to see, a carefully curated image for mass consumption. The '68 comeback special was another masterful exercise in image control and recalibration. After years of lighthearted films, the special aimed to re-establish Elvis as a serious, electrifying rock and roll performer. The black leather, the raw energy, the candid conversations, these were all designed to project a new, more authentic, yet still controlled image. It showed a strategic understanding of television's power to shape public perception and reclaim an artist's narrative. This kind of image management, heavily reliant on broadcast media, became a blueprint for celebrity public relations. But what parts of Elvis's true self were sacrificed or suppressed in the relentless pursuit of this carefully constructed star image? How did television's need for simplicity and easy narratives limit the complexity of his public persona? Did the constant control of his image by his manager inadvertently lay the groundwork for a later backlash or a sense of inauthenticity? And what unknown aspects of his personality and artistry were never allowed to see the light of day because they didn't fit the approved TV-ready persona? Number 8, how did Elvis challenge and reinforce racial lines on TV? Elvis Presley's rise to fame, amplified by television, brought the sounds of rhythm and blues and gospel, largely created by black artists, into mainstream white America. This was a complex and often controversial aspect of his impact. On one hand, scholars like Michael Bertrand have argued that Elvis, as a white artist, exposed a vast white audience to a genre of music they might otherwise not have encountered due to the deeply segregated media landscape of the 1950s. His television appearances, reaching millions of white homes, undeniably brought black musical traditions into the national spotlight, albeit through a white performer. When Elvis sang songs originated by black artists like Hound Dog Willie Mae Big Mama, Thornton, or Mystery Train, Junior Parker, he introduced these melodies and rhythms to an audience that might have been unfamiliar with the original versions or unwilling to listen to them on race radio stations. Television's national reach broke down some of the geographical and social barriers that separated musical genres. By visually presenting this music, often performed with a raw energy reminiscent of black performers, Elvis pushed against the unspoken rules of segregated entertainment. He made a black sound acceptable, even desirable to a white mass audience through the most mainstream of media. However, this impact is also deeply fraught with questions of cultural appropriation. While Elvis publicly acknowledged his influences and respected black musicians, his immense commercial success, largely facilitated by television exposure, often overshadowed the black artists who pioneered the genre. As Trisha Rose, a cultural studies scholar, has pointed out, white artists often benefited disproportionately from presenting black musical forms to a mass market, leaving the originators with less recognition and financial reward. Television, being a powerful legitimizer of culture, played a role in this by prioritizing white performers who could deliver acceptable versions of rock and roll. The visual representation of Elvis on television, especially his electrifying performance style, was often seen as an acceptable channel for black cultural expression for white audiences. His moves, his sound, were revolutionary for white television, but they had roots in black performance traditions. This presented a paradox. Television amplified a voice that blurred racial musical lines, yet in doing so, often reinforced the economic and social disparities between black and white artists. The ongoing debate about Elvis's role in racial integration versus appropriation in music is a persistent theme in academic discussions about his legacy and television's role in it. But if television had been more racially integrated in the 1950s, featuring black rock and roll artists as prominently as white ones, would Elvis's impact have been seen differently? Did the visual nature of television and the way Elvis presented himself make him more or less controversial in terms of racial dynamics compared to just his music on radio? How did the perceived whiteness of television in the 1950s frame Elvis's adoption of black musical styles for the mass audience? And what did the absence of equally powerful black rock and roll artists on mainstream national television at the time mean for the future of popular music and media representation? Number 7, how did technological advances in TV affect Elvis's presentation? Television technology was constantly evolving during Elvis's active career, and these advancements significantly impacted how he was presented to the public. His career spanned from the black and white, often grainy, early days of television to the advent of color broadcasting and more sophisticated production techniques. Each leap in technology offered new ways to capture and transmit his performances. Dr. Michelle Hilms, an expert in broadcasting history, notes that television's technical evolution often dictated artistic possibilities for live and recorded performance. In the mid-1950s, when Elvis first exploded onto the scene, television was primarily a live black and white medium. Cameras were bulky, lighting was basic, and sound quality could be inconsistent. Yet, even with these limitations, Elvis's raw energy managed to cut through. His dynamic movements, his stark black hair against light suits, and his expressive face were captured effectively by the stark contrasts of black and white. The limitations often made his performances feel even more urgent and immediate. The famous waist-up shot on Ed Sullivan, for example, relied on the simple framing capabilities of the era's cameras. By the time of the '68 comeback special, color television was becoming more widespread, though still not universal. This allowed for a much richer visual experience. The deep red of the Trouble Guitar Man set, the intricate details of his black leather suit, and the expressions on his face could all be conveyed with greater fidelity. Color added another layer of spectacle and realism, making the special feel more vibrant and engaging for viewers with color sets. Directors like Steve Binder could use color as an artistic tool, something unavailable in Elvis's earliest broadcasts. Further advancements in the early 1970s leading up to specials like Aloha from Hawaii in 1973 brought even greater sophistication. Multi-camera setups became standard, allowing for more dynamic editing and varied perspectives. The satellite technology, as discussed earlier, enabled global live broadcasts, massively expanding reach. Video recording technology improved, meaning performances could be captured with higher quality, edited meticulously, and rebroadcast countless times, preserving his image and sound with greater clarity for future generations. The improved sound recording capabilities also meant that the nuances of his powerful voice and the instrumentation could be appreciated more fully by home viewers. These technical improvements allowed Elvis's performances to become grander, more visually impressive, and more widely accessible. They transformed him from a black and white phenomenon into a vibrant global superstar, his image evolving alongside the medium itself. But what if color television had been widely adopted much earlier in the 1950s? Would the initial public reaction to Elvis have been even more intense, or would the added realism have diluted some of the raw, almost mythic quality of his black and white appearances? How did the technical limitations of early television inadvertently force directors to focus on Elvis's core charisma, rather than relying on elaborate production? And what nuances of his live performances, both musically and visually, were forever lost due to the recording technologies of the time, and what might modern digital capture have revealed? Number 6. How is Elvis portrayed in later TV? Biopics and documentaries. Elvis Presley's life and legacy have been a continuous source of material for television long after his death. Countless biopics, documentaries, and specials have attempted to tell his story, often shaping how subsequent generations perceive him. These productions, ranging from dramatic portrayals to historical deep dives, demonstrate television's enduring fascination with his complex life. Dr. Pamela Robertson-Wojcik, a scholar of celebrity studies, notes that biopics often reflect the cultural anxieties and values of the era in which they are made, and Elvis's story is continually reinterpreted. Early biopics, like the 1979 made-for-TV movie Elvis, starring Kurt Russell, directed by John Carpenter, often focused on his rise to fame, his relationship with Colonel Parker, and his struggles. These productions were crucial in introducing Elvis's story to audiences who might not have experienced his peak years firsthand. They established a narrative arc that became popular: the talented, rebellious youth, the challenges of stardom, and the tragic decline. Where television's episodic nature also allowed for miniseries formats, providing a broader canvas to explore different phases of his life. Later documentaries, especially those airing on channels like PBS or HBO, often delve deeper into specific aspects such as his musical influences, his military service, his relationship with Priscilla, or his later struggles with health and addiction. These productions benefit from hindsight and access to more archival footage, interviews with associates, and critical analysis. They often aim to provide a more nuanced, sometimes deconstructive, view of the icon, moving beyond simple hagiography. For example, the 2018 HBO documentary Elvis Presley, The Searcher, tried to focus on his artistic journey, emphasizing his love for diverse musical genres. Television's portrayal of Elvis is not static. It evolves with cultural sensitivities and new scholarship. Contemporary documentaries might explore his role in racial dynamics with more critical distance, or examine the mental health toll of extreme celebrity in a way that earlier productions couldn't. Each new generation of filmmakers and television producers finds new angles to explore, continually reinterpreting the Elvis myth for a new audience. This ongoing television presence ensures that Elvis remains a relevant cultural figure, constantly being re-examined and understood through different lenses. But what parts of Elvis's story are still untold or overlooked in these numerous television portrayals? Do these biopics and documentaries, despite their attempts at authenticity, inadvertently reinforce certain myths or stereotypes about him? How do changing social norms and historical perspectives influence what aspects of his life are emphasized or downplayed in new productions? And will television ever be able to capture the full, complex reality of Elvis Presley, or is his image destined to remain a series of carefully constructed narratives for the small screen? Number 5. How did Elvis's on-screen fashion influence TV trends? Elvis Presley's personal style, particularly his stage costumes and casual wear, was heavily amplified by television and had a significant impact on fashion trends displayed and promoted on the small screen. His daring, sartorial choices, especially in an era of more conservative dress, became iconic, and their repeated exposure on TV made them instantly recognizable and influential. Dr. Stella Bruzzi, a scholar of fashion and film, often discusses how celebrity image, particularly through visual media, shapes popular style. In his early TV appearances, Elvis's look was a blend of rockabilly cool slicked back hair, often a suit with a popped collar, and a slightly rebellious swagger. This was a distinct departure from the clean-cut images of other popular entertainers. For young men, seeing Elvis on television offered a blueprint for a new kind of masculinity: stylish, confident, and a bit dangerous. His sideburns and pompadour became instant trends, copied by countless fans. Television visually broadcast this new aesthetic into millions of homes, making it accessible and aspirational. Later, the '68 comeback special cemented another iconic look: the black leather suit. This outfit, tight and powerful, was designed to evoke his rebellious early image. Its impact was immediate. The image of Elvis in black leather, performing with raw energy, was one of the most memorable moments in television history and instantly became a touchstone for rock fashion. It influenced how other musicians would dress for television specials and concerts, emphasizing edginess and confidence. And then there were the jumpsuits. Beginning in the early 1970s, Elvis's flamboyant, sequined jumpsuits became his signature stage wear, prominently featured in his concert films and television specials like Aloha from Hawaii. These elaborate costumes, often designed by Bill Ballou, were a spectacle in themselves. While over the top, they represented a theatricality that became synonymous with his later career. Seeing these on TV, with their bold designs and intricate embellishments, contributed to a shift in popular perception of what a male performer could wear. They influenced glam rock aesthetics and the broader acceptance of more theatrical, flamboyant fashion in music and entertainment. Television, by providing a constant visual stream of Elvis's evolving style, allowed these fashion statements to permeate popular culture. It showed how clothing could be an extension of performance, a key part of an artist's brand, and a powerful influencer of broader trends, not just in fashion, but in how people dress to express identity. But what if Elvis had stuck to more conventional attire throughout his career? Would his overall impact on television and popular culture have been diminished? Did his radical fashion choices, amplified by TV, sometimes overshadow his musical contributions, especially in his later years? How did the changing quality of television broadcasts, from black and white to vibrant color, influence the perception and adoption of his evolving fashion statements? And what specific fashion choices inspired by Elvis on TV went largely unnoticed, only to resurface in unexpected ways in later decades? Number 4. How did TV blur the lines between live and recorded performance? Elvis Presley's career on television constantly played with the distinction between live and recorded performance, ultimately blurring those lines for audiences and setting a precedent for how music would be presented on screen. In the early days, most variety shows were live, giving Elvis an immediate, raw platform. But as technology evolved, so did the possibilities for manipulating and presenting performance. Dr. Lisa Gittleman, a media studies scholar, highlights how new media technologies often reshape our understanding of liveness and authenticity. His early 1956 appearances on shows like the Dorsey Brothers Stage Show, the Milton Berle Show, and the Ed Sullivan Show were all live. This meant audiences experienced Elvis's raw, unedited energy directly. The potential for mistakes, the spontaneity, and the sheer immediacy of seeing him perform in real time contributed to the excitement and controversy. The liveness was a key part of his appeal. It felt dangerous and authentic. This live format connected directly to the tradition of vaudeville and radio, where the now was paramount. However, as Elvis moved into film, his musical performances became recorded, choreographed, and edited. His musical numbers in movies were pre-recorded, then lip-synced or performed to playback on set, often with multiple takes and camera angles. When these films then aired on television, audiences were watching a meticulously crafted, non-live version of Elvis. This accustomed viewers to seeing musical performances that, while visually dynamic, were fundamentally mediated and non-spontaneous. The '68 comeback special then brought a fascinating blend. It was a live performance, but it was also a highly produced television event. Segments were taped over several days, edited, and then broadcasts. While the sit-down sessions had a very live, spontaneous feel, they were still recorded. The more elaborate production numbers were carefully rehearsed and filmed. This special masterfully created an illusion of liveness and spontaneity while being a polished, edited television product. It taught audiences to accept and appreciate a new kind of liveness, one that was curated for the screen. Later, his concert films like Elvis, That's the Way It Is, and Elvis on Tour were also edited compilations of multiple concerts and behind-the-scenes footage. While the concerts themselves were live events, the films presented a highly constructed version of them. These productions, widely shown on television, solidified the idea that a live performance on TV could be a composite, a perfect cut, rather than a single, unadulterated moment. This blending of live energy with recorded precision became a standard for musical television, paving the way for everything from music videos to sophisticated awards show performances that are often pre-taped or heavily managed. But how did this blurring of live and recorded performance affect audiences' expectations for authenticity and other forms of televised entertainment? Did it ultimately diminish the value of truly live, spontaneous television, or did it elevate the craft of filmed musical performance? What did Elvis himself feel about the tension between his raw live power and the demands of television's mediated presentation? And did the constant exposure to polished, recorded performances on TV unintentionally make real, unedited, live performance seem somehow less perfect or less engaging for future generations? Number 3, how did TV personalities and interviewers shape Elvis's image? The hosts and interviewers on television played a critical role in shaping how the public perceived Elvis Presley, acting as gatekeepers and interpreters of his image. Their reactions, questions, and even their jokes about him influenced audience reception, sometimes amplifying controversy, sometimes softening his rebellious edge. Dr. Horace Newcomb, a scholar of television and culture, often discusses the power of the host figure in mediating the relationship between performers and the mass audience. When Elvis first appeared on national TV, hosts like Tommy and Jimmy Dorsey on Stage Show were relatively restrained. They introduced him as a new talent, but their own traditional musical backgrounds contrasted with his rock and roll energy. This contrast was part of the appeal, but also subtly positioned Elvis as something other. Where Milton Berle on his show in June 1956 took a different approach. Berle, known for his comedic flair, directly addressed the controversy surrounding Elvis's moves, even joking about them and performing a parody of Elvis himself. While done in jest, this public acknowledgement of the danger associated with Elvis intensified the media buzz. Burrell's segment effectively framed Elvis as a figure of controversy, and the host's reaction served as a proxy for the bewildered adult audience. This wasn't just an introduction, it was a cultural conversation mediated by a powerful television personality. Ed Sullivan, perhaps the most influential host of the era, initially declared he wouldn't book Elvis due to his vulgarity. His eventual booking, and the subsequent waist-up censorship, was a monumental act of gatekeeping. Sullivan's famous line, "I want to say to Elvis Presley and the country that this is a real decent fine boy," was a deliberate attempt to legitimize Elvis for a skeptical adult audience. It was an endorsement from a trusted figure attempting to soothe moral panic. Sullivan's authority, broadcast into millions of homes, had the power to either condemn or bless a performer, and his eventual blessing of Elvis was a turning point. Throughout his career, televised interactions with hosts and interviewers helped to manage his public persona. These figures, through their controlled environments, offered a filter through which the public could safely consume the phenomenon of Elvis. They translated his wildness into something understandable, often by either validating him or playfully critiquing him, but always within the bounds of network television. But what if these influential hosts had been consistently negative or had refused to book Elvis entirely? Would his rise have been stunted, or would he have found other avenues to mainstream fame? How much of the public's perception of Elvis was formed by the host's reactions to him, rather than Elvis's performances alone? Did Elvis resent being tamed or interpreted by these powerful TV figures, or did he understand it as a necessary step for mass appeal? And how did the power dynamic between charismatic hosts and rising stars on TV shape the way future generations of celebrities were introduced to the public? Number 2. How did television reshape who watched music and entertainment? Before Elvis, television was still finding its footing, and music on TV often catered to a broader, more adult demographic. But Elvis Presley, amplified by the small screen, irrevocably changed who watched music and entertainment, effectively creating and targeting a distinct youth market. This shift had profound and lasting consequences for television programming and advertising. Dr. Lynn Spiegel, a scholar specializing in television history and domestic culture, details how the medium transformed family viewing habits and the segmentation of audiences. In the mid-1950s, television was largely a family affair. Everyone gathered around the single set in the living room. Elvis's explosive appearances, however, fractured this communal viewing. While parents often reacted with alarm or disapproval, teenagers were captivated. This created a generation gap in real time, played out across the airwaves. The shows featuring Elvis became must-see TV for young people, even if it meant watching with disapproving parents in the room. This focused attention from a specific demographic showed networks the immense power of targeting youth. This led to a reevaluation of television's audience. Executives and advertisers realized that teenagers were not just a segment of the family, they were a distinct consumer group with their own tastes and, crucially, their own spending money. Elvis's immense popularity among teens, directly linked to his TV exposure, demonstrated that programming geared towards this demographic could achieve massive ratings and drive merchandise sales. This understanding paved the way for the creation of shows specifically for teenagers, like American Bandstand, which emerged around the same time and further cemented television's role in youth culture. Television, through Elvis, taught us that the music and entertainment industry could be segmented. It wasn't just about appealing to the broadest common denominator. It was about identifying and serving niche, yet powerful audiences. This insight led to a diversification of programming over time, moving away from purely family-oriented content to shows and specials designed for younger viewers. It empowered the youth demographic, giving them a voice and a platform through which their cultural preferences could be expressed and validated. The teenager, as a powerful consumer and cultural force, largely visible through and shaped by television, truly began with Elvis. But how did this new focus on the youth market, catalyzed by Elvis on TV, ultimately affect the quality or complexity of programming? Did it lead to a dumbing down of content, or did it spark greater creativity in addressing diverse audiences? What were the hidden costs or benefits of fragmenting the once unified family viewing experience? And how might television's relationship with youth culture have evolved if a different artist, less controversial or less charismatic, had been the one to first capture the attention of a generation via the small screen? Number 1, what are we still missing about Elvis's deepest media impact? After all the academic analyses, the historical accounts, the countless documentaries, and the endless reevaluation, it feels like we know so much about Elvis Presley's impact on television and media. We've traced his path from an unknown singer to a global icon, examined the controversies, and dissected the strategic brilliance of his career. But despite this deep well of knowledge, there are still layers to uncover, questions that linger, and subtle reverberations we might be missing about his most profound and lasting effects on the media landscape. Dr. Marshall McLuhan, in his famous statement, "The medium is the message," suggested that the form of media itself, not just its content, shapes human experience. With Elvis, the message was very much intertwined with the evolving medium of television. One area we might still underestimate is the subconscious non-linear influence he had on future media producers, directors, and performers. It's not just about direct imitation or explicit strategies. It's about the collective memory, the cultural DNA that his appearances embedded. How many directors, when conceptualizing a musical special or a pop star's image, were unconsciously drawing on the visual language, the pacing, or the emotional intensity that Elvis's TV moments established? This isn't something easily quantifiable in studies or interviews. It's a pervasive aesthetic ghost, influencing choices without explicit acknowledgement. We also might not fully grasp the long-term psychological impact on audiences. Beyond the immediate fan hysteria, how did the sudden, intense presence of Elvis on the small screen alter the relationship between viewers and the concept of celebrity itself? Did he, more than any other figure before him, condition us to expect a certain level of manufactured intimacy, visual spectacle, and controversy from our stars? This goes beyond marketing tactics. It speaks to the very architecture of celebrity culture that TV built. His story is a foundational text for understanding the parasocial relationship between fan and star, a concept that is only growing in complexity in the digital age. And what about the untold stories of those who didn't buy into the Elvis phenomenon? What did his television presence mean for the countercultural movements that arose in opposition to mainstream popular culture, which he came to represent for some? Was his constant presence on TV, even in his later, more predictable phases, a catalyst for searching out alternative forms of entertainment, or did he simply solidify the mainstream? We often focus on those he captivated, but the reactions of those he alienated or bored might tell us just as much about television's evolving role in cultural identity. Finally, in an age of fragmented media and individualized screens, what does the communal shared experience of Elvis on early network television teach us about the lost power of a single, unifying cultural event? His appearances were water cooler talk for an entire nation. Can any single artist or event achieve that kind of simultaneous cross-demographic impact through television today? Perhaps the true depth of his media impact lies not just in what he did, but in what he represented, a fleeting moment when television could truly unite and sometimes divide an entire population around a single electrifying figure. But what if the academic lenses we use are still too narrow to fully capture the diffuse, almost atmospheric influence of Elvis on TV? How much of his impact is a butterfly effect, subtly altering countless unrelated media decisions over decades? What would a truly global, non-Western academic analysis reveal about his media presence and its unforeseen consequences? And are we perhaps too focused on the what and the how, and not enough on the unspoken, deeply embedded why of his enduring, television-driven power over popular culture?